Wherever you are listening from right now, whether it's the quiet of your room, a walk under an open sky, or a moment of stillness carved out in a busy day, I invite you to pause, breathe deeply, and give yourself permission to simply be here. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, nothing to perform. Just the comfort of words carried to you, like ripples moving across water, softly reaching the shores of your mind. This space we are creating together is gentle. It is safe. It is a sanctuary where curiosity meets calm, where questions don't need immediate answers, and where mysteries of the universe can be held in your hands like precious stones. Turn slowly, carefully, so the light catches their hidden edges. If you've been feeling restless, uncertain, or pulled in too many directions, let this be your refuge. If you've been hungry for clarity, for a deeper sense of meaning, or simply for a pause in the noise, you are exactly where you need to be. Now, let's take a slow breath together. In hold and out. With that exhale, imagine setting down the weight of your day, if only for a little while. You don't need to remember everything we explore here. You don't need to take notes or strive for perfection. Let the words flow like a quiet stream, carrying you where they may. Because today, we are stepping into a question so profound that it touches not only your thoughts, but the very core of your existence. The frequency of your identity, and how it shapes the reality that appears before you. There is a mystery at play in the fabric of life. Why does it seem that two people can start from the same place, put in the same effort, hold the same dreams, and yet one flourishes while the other struggles endlessly? Why does it seem that desire alone is not enough to create change? Why do some lives feel magnetized to abundance, love, and opportunity, while others remain tethered to repeating cycles of limitation? The easy answers don't hold. The common advice, work harder, think positive, wait your turn, falls apart the moment you observe life closely. Something deeper is happening, something invisible, something that cannot be measured in effort alone. And that something is frequency. Your identity, the essence of how you see yourself, does not sit still. It hums, it vibrates, it resonates at a subtle pitch that reality itself responds to. The truth is unnerving. You are not attracting what you desire. You are attracting what you are. More precisely, you are attracting what you are being at the level of frequency. This is not the frequency of sound, nor the frequency of light as science measures it. It is the frequency of existence itself, the code behind the curtain of your daily life. It is the invisible language through which reality listens to you, evaluates you, and responds. And the contradiction that pulls us into this exploration is stark. Your identity feels like the most personal, intimate thing you could ever possess. Yet so much of it was never yours to begin with. Think about it. How much of what you call you was chosen consciously? How many of your beliefs, habits, and automatic responses were written by parents, culture, religion, or peers before you had the awareness to decide otherwise? How many of your dreams are truly your own, and how many are echoes of someone else's expectations? This is where the paradox begins. You've been taught to trust your identity as the anchor of who you are. But what if that anchor was forged in someone else's fire? What if, all this time, the frequency you've been transmitting into reality wasn't even your authentic signal but a borrowed one, a distorted one? Now we are standing at the edge of something disquieting. If identity is not wholly yours, then what has reality been responding to? What desires have been drowned out because the frequency you broadcast is out of alignment with the reality you long for? This is the thread we will follow, not in haste, not in panic, but with the steady awareness that each question we raise opens a doorway. Each paradox is a key hidden in contradiction. In this series, we will walk carefully through these doorways one by one. We will uncover the invisible prison that keeps you vibrating at yesterday's frequency. We will expose the betrayal of unconscious signals that work against your conscious intentions. And most importantly, we will begin to touch the dangerous, exhilarating possibility that within you lies not only the lock, but also the key. This exploration will not flatter your comfort. It will not reassure you with gentle cliches. Instead, it will unsettle. It will tug at threads you thought were unshakable. It will leave questions hanging in the air like sharp notes unresolved. That is the point, because only in tension does the mind awaken. Only in paradox does the soul stir. As we move through these chapters together, expect to feel the ground shifting under you. One moment you may feel seen, the next you may feel challenged. One truth may liberate you, while the next may demand you let go of something you never thought you could release. This is not entertainment. It is initiation. And yet, through it all, know this: you are safe here. No matter how sharp the questions, no matter how destabilizing the paradoxes, you are not lost. You are not broken. You are simply uncovering the frequencies that have always been inside you, waiting to be tuned. So, let yourself relax. Allow curiosity to be your guide. Let the words fall into you like seeds. Some will take root now, others may bloom later, perhaps when you least expect them. You don't need to force growth. Growth will come on its own, in its own time, once the soil of awareness is prepared. And that is exactly what we are doing here. Preparing the soil, unsettling it, breaking the hard crust of habit so that new frequencies, new realities can finally take root. Today marks the beginning of this journey into the paradox of identity and frequency. A cinematic unraveling of the most intimate mystery. Why reality listens to who you are, not what you want. We start with the first disturbing question, the one that tears a hole in the fabric of ordinary life. Why do some people bend reality while others drown in it? That is where we begin. The question lingers in the air like smoke. Why do some people seem to bend reality to their will, while others, equally gifted, equally determined, drown in the very same waters? It is a question that silences the noise of everyday logic. Because logic tells us that hard work is the path. Logic tells us that persistence is the key. Logic tells us that talent, intelligence, and effort determine outcomes. But then life presents the contradiction. Those who should rise often fall, and those who should fall often rise. You've seen it. You've felt it. Perhaps you've even lived it. Two individuals begin from the same starting line. They hold the same vision, the same fire, the same determination. Yet, as time passes, their paths fracture. One ascends, as though carried by unseen currents, lifted into opportunities that seem to materialize at the exact moment they are needed. The other struggles, paddling endlessly, gasping for air, watching as the horizon of their dream drifts further and further away. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is frequency. And yet the paradox deepens. If frequency is truly the difference, why is it so invisible? Why do those caught in struggle rarely sense the hidden vibration they are sending out into the fabric of reality? Why do they believe, to their last breath, that more effort will shift the tides, when in truth, effort without frequency alignment only tightens the chains? Here is where the story turns unsettling. Because if effort alone cannot alter outcomes, if willpower alone cannot force reality's hand, then every rule you were taught about success, growth, and change is broken. And once broken, those rules reveal something far more unnerving. You are not in control of reality in the way you thought. Reality does not respond to your desire. Reality responds to your being. But let us press deeper. What exactly does it mean to bend reality? Does it mean some are chosen while others are condemned? Does it mean destiny plays favorites? No. The answer is sharper, stranger, and more precise. Those who bend reality are not bending at all. They are resonating. Their identity frequency aligns with the outcomes they seek, and so reality has no choice but to reflect that back. Those who drown are not drowning because they lack effort or talent. They drown because they are resonating with a different signal, an identity that is slightly out of tune with the reality they want to step into. And so the universe, with ruthless consistency, mirrors back what is already inside them, even as they cry out for something else. The truth cuts clean. Life does not give you what you ask for. Life gives you what you broadcast. Consider how disturbing this is. Your conscious mind may be filled with visions of wealth, love, freedom, expansion. But if your identity frequency hums with scarcity, unworthiness, or fear, reality will not deliver what contradicts that vibration. You may pray, affirm, or toil until your body collapses, yet reality will respond only to the signal you are. And so we return to the paradox of two paths. One individual, whose frequency matches abundance, finds doors opening, coincidences stacking, momentum accelerating. The other, whose frequency is clouded by misalignment, pushes harder and harder, yet finds every door locked, every step sinking deeper into sand. Does this sound unfair? Perhaps, but fairness has never been the language of the universe. Precision is. This is the glitch in reality that demands our attention. The uncomfortable truth that makes us sit upright, pulse quickening. If your frequency is misaligned, no amount of visible effort can compensate. It is not about how hard you row. It is about whether your boat is pointed toward the current or against it. Now pause. Let this disturb you. Allow the contradiction to live in you without rushing to solve it. Because the more uncomfortable this feels, the closer you are to the doorway of awakening. The story of bending reality is not about superior people, chosen people, or gifted people. It is about tuned people. People who unknowingly or consciously align their identity with the frequency of the reality they seek. But here is where the hook sharpens. If resonance is the secret, then why does identity feel so difficult to change? Why do people repeat the same patterns year after year, despite all their attempts to grow? Why do those who consciously long for transformation remain trapped in cycles of familiarity? It is because identity, as you know it, is not yours. That is the revelation that follows. That is the key to understanding why some bend reality and others drown. Because the drowning is not a failure of effort. It is the consequence of carrying an identity that was never authentically chosen. An identity vibrating at a frequency inherited, imposed, or absorbed. This is why reality feels so merciless. Because it is not judging your desires, it is judging your frequency. And your frequency is determined not by what you want, but by who you unconsciously believe yourself to be. So, let us sit in this tension. Why do some bend reality? Because their identity's frequency is congruent with the reality they desire. Why do others drown? Because their identity's frequency is discordant, even if their conscious minds scream for change. The haunting paradox is this: effort without alignment is futility. Effort with alignment is inevitability. This should unsettle you. It should rattle something inside, because it means the path you were taught to walk, the path of striving, grinding, forcing, is not the path that alters reality. It means everything you thought you knew about control must be questioned. But it also means something extraordinary. If the secret is identity frequency, then the power has always been inside you. Not in what you do, but in who you are being. Not in chasing reality, but in tuning yourself so precisely that reality has no choice but to chase you. This is the paradox that separates the few from the many. The few who bend reality may not even know what they are doing. They simply vibrate in harmony with the frequency of their desired reality, and so doors open without force. The many who drown are not cursed. They are simply misaligned, unknowingly broadcasting signals that repel the very outcomes they long for. Now we have torn the veil slightly. Now we see why reality plays favorites when, in truth, it is only playing mirrors. But a more disturbing question waits just beyond this one. If identity frequency is the true determinant, then we must ask, how much of your identity was ever really yours? And here lies the next paradox, the next cliff, the next haunting note left unresolved. If your identity is truly yours, why does it sound like a voice you never chose? That is where we are going next. The question cuts like a blade. If your identity truly belongs to you, why does it echo with voices you never invited? Pause and feel that unease. Because if the identity you trust is not entirely yours, then who or what placed it there? And if your sense of self is not original, how can its frequency ever match the reality you long for? This is where the comfort of certainty begins to unravel. We live under the illusion that identity is the most personal possession we hold. It feels private, feels authentic. It feels like the undeniable I am that defines existence. Yet, when examined closely, identity reveals itself as a patchwork, stitched together from fragments, impressions, and instructions that arrived long before you could understand or resist. Think back. not to your memories but to your conditioning. The words spoken to you in childhood, the rules implied, the expectations enforced. You're good at this. You're terrible at that. You're shy. You're too loud. Don't dream too big. Stay realistic. These statements carve grooves in the psyche, grooves that harden into identity. And once hardened, they vibrate like strings, sending frequencies into reality. Did you choose those grooves? Did you select those beliefs? No, they were written into you before choice was possible. They became the music of your identity without your consent. And so the paradox intensifies. The self you cling to may not even be the self that is truly you. It may be a borrowed script, a hand-me-down frequency, which means reality has not been responding to your authentic essence, but to an identity constructed by others. Unsettling, isn't it? Because this means that the frequency you've been transmitting into reality, your unconscious signal, may not reflect your desires at all. Instead, it may reflect the beliefs of your parents, the fears of your culture, the wounds of your past. Reality, merciless in its precision, mirrors that back to you, while your conscious mind cries out for something else. Now, consider the contradiction. You wake each morning believing you are living as yourself. Yet the thoughts you think, the choices you make, the actions you take, all flow through the filter of an identity you never fully authored. And so, the life you attract is not born of freedom but of programming. Here lies the haunting truth. The voice inside your head, the one narrating your worth, your limits, your possibilities, that voice may not be your own. It may be an echo, a borrowed vibration repeating itself until it feels natural. And if that is true, then we must confront a disturbing question. Whose life have you been living? The implications are staggering. If identity is programmed, then so is frequency. If frequency is programmed, then reality itself has been programmed, which means your struggles, your disappointments, your repeated cycles may not be the result of fate nor failure, but of inherited frequency patterns. This is the prison of borrowed identity, a cage so subtle that most never notice its bars. They fight, they strain, they push against invisible walls, never realizing that the walls are not outside of them, but within. And here is the cruel irony. The more they fight, the stronger the prison becomes, because effort, poured through the frequency of a false identity, only strengthens the reality that identity attracts. In trying to escape, they reinforce their captivity. So, we stand before a paradox that destabilizes everything. Identity feels like yours, but behaves like an imposter. Promises freedom, but delivers repetition. It whispers individuality, but speaks with another's voice. This should disturb you. It should create a crack in your certainty, because through that crack, light begins to enter. And yet, here is the danger. If your identity is borrowed, distorted, imposed, does that mean you are powerless? Does that mean you are forever chained to echoes you never chose? No, the paradox has another layer. While you may not have authored your identity, you have always carried the capacity to rewrite it. The prison is real, but the lock is not external. The lock is you. Now let us follow this further. Identity is not fixed. It is fluid, vibrating, shifting with every reinforcement, every thought, every choice. The tragedy is not that identity can be imposed. The tragedy is that most people never question the imposition. They live as though the first voice they heard was the final truth. They never ask, whose voice is this? Whose belief am I carrying? Whose frequency am I broadcasting? But you are asking it now. And once asked, the question cannot be unasked. Once the thread is pulled, the fabric of borrowed identity begins to unravel. Consider this. If your identity has been built from external voices, then the reality you've been attracting has not been responding to you, but to them. Your struggles may not have been yours at all. They may have been the resonance of someone else's fear, someone else's doubt, someone else's limitation, echoing through you, manifesting as your life. This is why some people bend reality while others drown. The ones who bend may have, consciously or unconsciously, rejected the borrowed script. They may have aligned their identity with a frequency of authenticity, even if they could not explain how. The ones who drown may still be trapped, living out the vibration of voices that were never theirs to begin with. So pause here. Let this truth disturb you. Let it rattle the cage. Because only by seeing the prison can you reach for the key. And the key is this. You cannot attract the reality you desire if the voice of your identity is not your own. Reality listens only to authenticity. Anything less is static, distortion, noise. This leads us to the next paradox, the next cliff. If your identity has been borrowed, then your frequency has been betraying you. And if your frequency has been betraying you, then the reality you live may not even belong to you. Feel that. Sit with it. Because it forces the next, sharper question into the light. What if your frequency is betraying you, sending a signal you never meant to? That is where we are headed next. The silence after the question is deafening. If your frequency is betraying you, what does that mean for everything you thought you knew about your life? Consider it carefully. You walk through each day with desires burning in your heart. You speak affirmations. You visualize. You labor. You pray. Yet beneath it all, a quieter, more relentless current hums. Your frequency. And if that current contradicts your conscious desire, the universe responds not to the words you speak, but to the vibration you radiate. This is the betrayal. Not intentional, not malicious, simply precise. Reality does not listen to your lips. It listens to your being. And being is defined not by what you want, but by what you unconsciously believe. Now the contradiction deepens. You may want love, but if your frequency is saturated with fear of abandonment, what will reality mirror back? You may want abundance, but if your identity vibrates with scarcity, what will the universe deliver? You may long for freedom, yet if your inner resonance hums with unworthiness, what possibilities can appear before you? The betrayal is devastating. The very self you have trusted may be working against you. The very identity you've carried may be transmitting signals that sabotage your deepest desires. And worse still, you may not even hear the signal. It hums beneath awareness, constant, unyielding, while your conscious mind runs in circles trying to solve problems created by the frequency itself. This is why effort without alignment becomes exhaustion. This is why the harder you push, the deeper the rut becomes. Because the betrayal is not in your actions. It is in your vibration. But here is the paradox. The betrayal is not your enemy. It is a mirror. The universe is not cruel. It is consistent. It reflects with exactness the signal you are sending, even when you are unaware. Which means the very betrayals you suffer are clues. They are evidence of the frequency you carry. Pause and let this land. Every repeated disappointment, every familiar frustration, every cycle that haunts you, each is not random misfortune. Each is not a punishment. Each is a broadcast made visible. If you keep attracting partners who leave, it is not evidence of fate. It is evidence of frequency. If you keep losing opportunities at the last moment, it is not the universe mocking you. It is the universe reflecting the vibration of unworthiness you carry. If money slips through your hands as quickly as it comes, it is not bad luck. It is resonance with lack. This is the betrayal, but also the map. And yet, the paradox sharpens further. Because once you see this, once you realize your frequency has been betraying you, the next disturbing question arises. If frequency is unconscious, how can you ever change it? How do you transform something you cannot see? How do you alter a song that plays beneath hearing? How do you rewrite a code you did not write? This is where most turn back. This is where despair whispers. If I cannot even trust my own frequency, then I am doomed. But despair is only the voice of the false identity fighting for survival. Because the truth is different. You cannot control what you cannot see, but you can bring it into sight. The cycles of betrayal are not hidden to punish you. They are patterns designed to reveal themselves until you finally look. Each repeated pain is reality shouting, "Here is your frequency. Here is what you are sending." And when you see it, you are no longer trapped by it. But seeing requires honesty, the courage to face the possibility that you have been the architect of your disappointments, not the victim of them. The bravery to accept that your frequency has been shaping reality more than your actions ever could. the willingness to hold the mirror steady even when the reflection unsettles you. Because here is the haunting paradox. The betrayal of frequency is both the greatest prison and the greatest key. It confines you through unconscious repetition, but it also exposes itself through those very repetitions. The prison shows you the lock, and in doing so, whispers the possibility of a key. Still, a darker paradox remains. If your frequency has been betraying you, then for all these years, you may not have been living your life at all. You may have been living the life of a vibration, a pattern, a resonance inherited long before you could choose. Which means the question grows sharper, more unsettling. How much of your reality has been truly yours? Let the disturbance grow, because in disturbance you awaken. The betrayal of frequency is not cruel, it is precise. And precision means possibility. If reality mirrors your frequency with such exactness, then a new frequency will yield a new mirror. The key, then, is not more effort. It is not more striving. It is recognition, awareness, alignment. But before we leap into solutions, before we rush toward comfort, let us linger in the paradox. Because it is the paradox that awakens. If your frequency has been betraying you, then everything you thought you were choosing may have been chosen for you. Your decisions may not have been free, but predetermined by the resonance you carried. Your struggles may not have been personal failures, but inevitable reflections. Your reality, the one you thought was uniquely yours, may have been nothing more than an echo of someone else's programming vibrating through you. This should shake you. It should rattle the foundations of who you believe yourself to be. Because once you accept this, nothing looks the same again. And yet, here is the paradox's hidden gift. If your frequency has been betraying you, then the betrayals themselves are proof that reality is listening. Proof that reality responds with unwavering fidelity to your vibration. Proof that if you shift the broadcast, the mirror must change. This is not speculation. It is law. Now we arrive at the next cliff, the next unresolved question. If your frequency has been betraying you, then we must ask, what invisible force keeps you from changing it? What unseen cage holds you vibrating at yesterday's signal, no matter how desperately you want tomorrow's? Because if betrayal has been the theme, captivity is the reason. And so we sharpen the paradox once again. What invisible prison keeps you vibrating at yesterday's reality? That is where we go next. There is a haunting contradiction at the heart of human existence. You long for change. You envision new beginnings. You crave expansion, love, abundance, freedom. And yet, despite all your desire, despite all your effort, you remain tethered to the same cycles. The same struggles repeat. The same patterns resurface. The same disappointments circle back like vultures, feeding on the carcass of yesterday. Why? What invisible prison keeps you vibrating at yesterday's reality, even when you beg for tomorrow? The walls of this prison are not built of stone. They are not visible to the eye. They are woven from memory, habit, and belief. They are made of repetition, an identity broadcast that loops endlessly until it becomes indistinguishable from you. This is the prison of familiarity. Familiarity is seductive. It masquerades as safety. The human nervous system clings to what it knows, even if what it knows is pain. Because pain, when familiar, feels less dangerous than uncertainty. And so you return again and again to the same frequencies, not because they serve you, but because they are known. This is why the prisoner does not see the bars. Because the bars are made of comfort. Not joy, not abundance, not alignment, but the grim comfort of repetition. And yet the paradox intensifies, because this comfort is false. What feels safe is killing you. What feels secure is suffocating you. What feels permanent is only the echo of a frequency vibrating from the past. Pause here. Let this disturb you. If you are honest, you will see it. The way you repeat the same arguments, the same financial struggles, the same emotional patterns. You may change cities, partners, jobs, or dreams, yet the vibration beneath them remains unchanged. And so the scenery alters, but the script repeats. Different faces, same story. Different stage, same frequency. This is the invisible prison. And here lies the cruel irony. The more you fight against it with effort alone, the stronger its grip becomes. Because effort, when poured into the soil of yesterday's identity, only grows more of yesterday's reality. Every attempt to escape becomes reinforcement. Every struggle to break free becomes a deeper entanglement. This is the paradox of captivity. You are trapped not because the door is locked, but because you cannot see the door at all. The invisible prison operates through unconscious programming. Neural pathways etched deep by repetition. Emotional patterns anchored by unresolved wounds. Beliefs inherited without question. Identity forged in shadows and cemented by time. And so your frequency hums with the signal of yesterday. Not because you choose it consciously, but because the prison demands it. The walls of familiarity trap you in resonance with the past, even as you scream for the future. But here is where the paradox sharpens into something more sinister. The prison is not external. No warden holds you captive. No chains bind your wrists. The prison lives within, and the jailer is you. This truth is disturbing. It should be, because it leaves no one else to blame. Not your parents, not your partner, not society, not fate. Only the invisible cage of identity you have unconsciously carried forward from the past. And yet, this is also the opening. Because if you are both prisoner and jailer, then you are also the one who holds the key. This is where most hesitate, because freedom requires the death of familiarity. To step into a new frequency is to abandon the comfort of the old. To shatter the bars is to accept uncertainty, to risk chaos, to face the death of who you thought you were. And so many choose captivity, even while begging for freedom. They would rather suffer what is known than risk what is unknown. They would rather replay the vibration of yesterday than face the silence of becoming someone new. This is the invisible prison that keeps you vibrating at yesterday's reality. Not external chains, but internal loyalty to the familiar. Now let us look more closely at its architecture. The prison has 3 primary walls. The first is belief. These are the inherited truths you never questioned. Money is scarce. Love always leaves. I'm not enough. These beliefs are not facts, but frequencies. They hum beneath your awareness, transmitting into the universe with unwavering precision. The second wall is emotion. Each unhealed wound traps you in resonance with the past. The heartbreak that was never resolved. The betrayal that was never released. The failure that was never forgiven. These emotions do not remain silent. They vibrate. They leak into your frequency and shape what reality mirrors back to you. The third wall is habit. The daily repetition of thoughts, choices, and actions. Each routine reinforces identity. Each behavior cements the frequency. Habit is the prison guard that ensures yesterday's vibration becomes today's, and today's becomes tomorrow's. Belief, emotion, habit. Together they form the invisible walls. And within those walls, you vibrate endlessly at the frequency of yesterday, unable to see beyond, unable to shift into the resonance of what you desire. This is the cruel genius of the prison. It convinces you that you are free even as you repeat the same cycles. It convinces you that effort will liberate you, even as effort deepens the groove. It convinces you that the problem is external. Bad luck, cruel people, broken systems, while the true captivity lies within. This is why reality feels merciless. It is not punishing you. It is reflecting you. It is showing you, with precision, the walls of your invisible prison. And yet the paradox grows sharper still. Because if the prison is invisible, how do you escape it? If the frequency of yesterday keeps broadcasting unconsciously, how do you silence it? If you are both prisoner and jailer, how do you become the key? Here is the disturbing answer. You cannot escape by force. You cannot smash the walls with effort. You cannot demand your way out, because effort poured into the prison only strengthens the prison. The only way out is transformation, and transformation feels like death, because the self that built the prison cannot walk out of it. The self that has been broadcasting yesterday cannot broadcast tomorrow. The very identity you cling to must dissolve. This is the terror of freedom, and this is why so few attain it. Because to leave the prison is to become unrecognizable, not only to others but to yourself. Now pause. Sit in the tension. Because here is the paradox that leads us forward. If you are both the lock and the prisoner, then perhaps you are also the master key. But what does it mean to be both lock and key? How can the same self that traps you also free you? How can the frequency of betrayal become the frequency of liberation? This is the next cliff, the next question left unresolved, the paradox that pulls us deeper. If you are the lock, could you also be the master key? That is where we go next. The paradox now stares at you with unsettling precision. If you are the lock, could you also be the master key? This contradiction is not comfortable. It bends the mind, twists logic, and dares you to see yourself differently. Because everything in you wants to believe that freedom lies elsewhere, that someone else holds the key, that some hidden force outside you must arrive to open the door. Yet what if the very identity that has trapped you in repetition also carries the code to liberation? Let us pull this apart piece by piece. You are the lock. That much is clear. Your identity, built from inherited beliefs, unresolved emotions, and habitual patterns, has constructed the invisible prison we uncovered in the last chapter. The lock is the vibration of yesterday repeating itself. The lock is the unconscious frequency broadcasting betrayal. The lock is the familiar cage of identity that keeps reality circling in endless loops. But here is the paradox. A lock is meaningless without a key. Every lock carries within its design the shape of the key that can open it, which means that if you are the lock, you also contain the blueprint of your liberation. This is the unsettling brilliance of existence. The same self that imprisons you has already encoded the possibility of freedom. The bars of your prison are not absolute, they are potential. And within that potential lies the outline of the key. Now pause and let this disturb you, because it means that the very struggles you have cursed may hold the exact shape of your freedom. The very betrayals you have suffered may carry the map to your liberation. The very frequency that has kept you trapped is also pointing to the frequency that can set you free. Think of it this way. Every lock reveals its key. The grooves, the cuts, the shapes of resistance inside the lock are the exact blueprint for the key that fits. In the same way, every limiting belief, every repeated wound, every cycle of frustration is the shape of your lock. And by seeing that shape clearly, you begin to recognize the design of the key. This is why awareness is terrifying. Because once you see the lock for what it is, you can no longer pretend that you are powerless. You can no longer blame fate or others or luck. The lock is you, which means the key must also be you. Here is the paradox sharpened. Your prison is also your map. But what does it mean to become the master key? It means this transformation does not require something outside of you. It requires you to decode the very frequency that has betrayed you, to hold the lock steady, study its grooves, and then forge yourself into the shape that can turn. This is why pain is the most honest teacher, because pain shows you the contours of the lock. Every disappointment is a groove. Every wound is a cut. Every repeated failure is a notch. Pain is not random, it is architecture. And by studying it, by refusing to look away, you begin to see the blueprint of the key. But here is where the paradox grows darker. The process of becoming the key feels like death. Because to fit the lock, you cannot remain as you are. You must reshape. You must file away the edges of the false identity. You must burn away the static of inherited frequencies. You must strip yourself down until only the truth remains. This reshaping is brutal. It requires the death of the familiar, the dissolution of everything that once felt safe. The ego resists it with fury, because to the ego, change is annihilation. And in a sense, it is. The false self must die for the true frequency to emerge. This is why most never become the key. They cling to the comfort of the lock, mistaking captivity for safety. They fear the death of the old self so deeply that they never discover the birth waiting on the other side. But for those who endure the fire, the reward is unimaginable. Because once you become the key, the lock must yield. Once your identity resonates with truth, the frequency shifts. Once the false self dissolves, the authentic vibration emerges, and reality, with ruthless consistency, mirrors it back. The lock was never external. The lock was never permanent. The lock was always waiting for the key you could become. Now pause again. Sit in the paradox. Because here is the disturbing implication. The very thing you thought was keeping you trapped, the false identity, the betrayal of frequency, the prison of yesterday, is also the thing that will set you free. Not because it is good, but because it is precise. Not because it is kind, but because it is exact. Every wound reveals what must be healed. Every betrayal reveals what must be released. Every disappointment reveals what must be reprogrammed. The lock reveals the key, because the lock is the key's design. This is why your struggles matter. They are not mistakes. They are not wasted years. They are the blueprints. They are the grooves. They are the shapes from which your master key will be forged. And yet, another paradox waits. Because if you are both lock and key, then the question becomes, how do you turn? How do you insert yourself into the doorway of transformation and unlock the reality you long for? This is the cliff where logic falters. Because the lock cannot open itself. The key cannot turn itself. The door cannot swing open by accident. Something more is required. Awareness, willingness, surrender. The courage to step into the unknown, to allow the death of the old self so the new frequency can emerge. This is why transformation feels impossible. Because the one who must turn the key is also the one who must dissolve. The false self cannot walk into the new reality. Only the true self can. And to reach that true self, the old identity must collapse. This is the paradox we now face. You are both prisoner and liberator, both lock and key. But even after the key is forged, another haunting question arises. How do you find the door? Because if the lock is you and the key is you, then perhaps the doorway itself is also you. Which means the path to freedom is hidden in plain sight, disguised as the very self you have always been. And so we end here, suspended once more on the edge of contradiction. If you are the lock and the key, then what if the door to your next reality is hiding in plain sight, disguised as you? That is what we will uncover next. The paradox sharpens into something almost unbearable. If you are both the lock and the key, then perhaps the doorway itself is not outside, not hidden in some distant horizon, but already here, disguised as you. The thought is disorienting. For your entire life, you've been taught to search outward. The dream lies ahead. The breakthrough waits elsewhere. The future holds the doorway. Yet what if the doorway is not in the future at all? What if it has always been present, camouflaged as the ordinary self you overlook every single day? This is not a comfortable truth. It feels like a betrayal of everything you've been told. Because if the doorway is already here, then why haven't you walked through it? If the threshold to your next reality has always been disguised as you, then why do you still feel trapped on this side of it? The answer is both simple and devastating. You do not recognize it. The human mind is conditioned to look for transformation as something dramatic, something external, something monumental. A sudden breakthrough, a cosmic sign, a miraculous shift. But reality does not play by that rule. Transformation hides in plain sight. It camouflages itself in the familiar. It conceals itself in the ordinary self you dismiss as unremarkable. And so you miss it. Again and again you stand before the doorway, and again you overlook it because it looks too much like you. This is the paradox of the disguised door. The future self you long for, the reality you dream of, the vibration you crave, all of it already exists. Not somewhere else. Not in some other time. Here, now. Encoded in the frequencies you already carry. But because it appears ordinary, because it wears the mask of your current identity, you fail to see it for what it is. Pause here. Let this disturb you, because it means you may have walked past your doorway countless times. You may have stood inches from transformation without ever realizing it. You may have mistaken the entrance to your desired reality for just another wall of your prison. And that is the cruelty of disguise. The doorway hides because the self you must become is already latent within you. The frequency of your next reality is not foreign. It is buried, dormant, waiting. The problem is not that it does not exist. The problem is that you refuse to recognize yourself as the one who carries it. This is why change feels impossible. Because the doorway never looks like what you expect. It looks like the version of you you've ignored, denied, or suppressed. The self you buried to fit in. The voice you silenced to be accepted. The truth you hid to survive. That is the doorway. That is the hidden entrance. And until you reclaim it, you remain outside. Here is the paradox sharpened into a blade. The door is not something you find. The door is something you recognize. Recognition is dangerous because it demands honesty. It demands you confront the parts of yourself you have avoided. It demands you admit that the future you long for has been waiting within, disguised as the present self you keep dismissing. And yet, recognition is also liberation. Because the moment you see the doorway for what it is, the moment you recognize that the self you already carry is the threshold, reality begins to shift. The disguised door reveals itself, and suddenly, the path forward is no longer hidden. But let us go deeper. What does this disguised doorway look like? It looks like the choices you dismiss as too small to matter. The instincts you silence because they contradict logic. The subtle pull towards something greater that you rationalize away. It looks like the truth you feel in your body, even as your mind talks you out of it. Every time you betray that truth, you turn away from the doorway. Every time you dismiss the small signal, you overlook the entrance. Every time you silence the authentic self, you walk past the threshold of your next reality. This is the haunting paradox. The door is not dramatic. It is subtle. It does not scream. It whispers. And only those willing to quiet the noise of programming can hear it. This is why reality disguises the door as you. Because the test is not whether you can force reality to change. It is whether you can recognize yourself as the doorway through which change occurs. And yet, the disguise is not meant to deceive you forever. The disguise is meant to awaken you, to frustrate you into finally realizing that the only way out is in, that the only path forward is recognition, that the only doorway worth finding is the one that reveals itself when you finally accept who you have always been beneath the noise. Now pause again, because here comes the sharper edge of the paradox. If the door is disguised as you, then the question becomes, who or what walks through when you finally open it? Because here is the haunting contradiction. The self that recognizes the door is not the same self that can walk through it. Recognition alone is not enough. The old frequency can see the doorway, but it cannot cross the threshold. Only the new frequency can, which means that to walk through the disguised door, the old self must dissolve, and a new self must emerge. This is the terror of transformation, because when you finally see the doorway, you must also face the death of the self that has carried you until now. The self you believed was you cannot cross. Only the frequency of your becoming can. This is why so many turn away at the threshold. They recognize the door, but they fear what must be left behind to step through it. They fear the annihilation of the old self. They fear becoming unrecognizable not only to others but to themselves. And yet, this is the price of freedom. The disguised doorway demands sacrifice. Not of effort, not of struggle, but of identity. The self that vibrates at yesterday's reality must die so the self that resonates with tomorrow can be born. This is why the doorway is disguised. Because if you knew what it required, you might never approach it. The disguise protects you until you are ready to face the death of the old and the birth of the new. And so we arrive at the next paradox, the next cliff, the next question that sharpens the blade even further. When you shift frequency, are you becoming your true self or erasing yourself? That is the riddle that waits on the other side of the doorway. And that is where we go next. The doorway stands before you. You recognize it now, disguised all along as yourself. But recognition brings no comfort, because the moment you see it, the question rises like a storm. When you step through, when you shift your frequency, are you becoming your true self, or are you erasing yourself entirely? The paradox grips tightly. On one side, the promise of authenticity, the birth of the self you were always meant to be. On the other, the terror of annihilation, the death of the identity you have known, the collapse of the you who has carried your story until now. Which is it? Rebirth or erasure? Salvation or destruction? This is the knife edge of transformation, and it is here that most falter. Because no matter how much you long for change, No matter how desperately you crave a new reality, the idea of dissolving the self you've clung to is unbearable. Even if that self has betrayed you, even if that self has kept you trapped, familiarity feels safer than oblivion. But the truth is merciless. You cannot keep both. You cannot hold onto yesterday's self and walk into tomorrow's frequency. You cannot cling to the lock while becoming the key. You cannot recognize the doorway and refuse the death it demands. And so you tremble before the threshold, haunted by the paradox. Will stepping through make me whole or erase me forever? Let us cut deeper. The fear of erasure is not irrational. Identity is survival. From childhood, you have been trained to anchor yourself to labels, roles, and narratives. I am this kind of person. I am not that kind of person. Each statement becomes scaffolding, supporting the illusion of stability. Without it, you fear collapse. Without it, you fear becoming nothing. But here is the paradox. The very scaffolding you cling to is what keeps you trapped in yesterday's frequency. Those roles, those labels, those stories, they are not your essence. They are costumes. And costumes, no matter how comfortable, cannot walk through the doorway of transformation. So the fear is real but misplaced. What dissolves is not you. It is the false shell that has concealed you. What dies is not the essence, it is the mask. What erases is not your being, it is the borrowed script. And yet, the mind screams otherwise, because the false identity does not want to die. It will fight, resist, bargain, and terrify you with illusions of annihilation. It will whisper, "If you let go of me, you will disappear." And because you have been entangled with it for so long, you believe the lie. This is why transformation feels like death. Because to the false self, it is death. And because you have mistaken the false self for the real self, you feel as though you are dying too. But here is the paradox turned on its head. The death of the false is the birth of the true. Erasure and revelation are the same act. What feels like destruction is liberation. What feels like loss is unveiling. Still, the terror remains. Because how can you know? How can you trust that what emerges on the other side is you at all? This is the leap the doorway demands. It does not allow certainty. It requires faith. Not blind faith in the universe, but faith in yourself, the self you have buried beneath the noise, the self whose frequency has been waiting all along. And yet, let us not soften the truth. This is not a gentle process. It is brutal. It is violent. It is the collapse of everything familiar. To shift frequency is to dismantle the architecture of the false identity brick by brick, until the structure crumbles. To shift frequency is to walk into the fire, knowing that what cannot burn will remain, and what does burn was never you. This is why so few cross the threshold. Because they cling to the illusion of safety, unwilling to risk the fire of annihilation. They mistake survival for life. They mistake the false for the true. They mistake the prison for freedom. But those who endure discover something astonishing. They emerge from the fire not erased, but revealed. The self that steps through is not new, it is ancient. Not invented, it is remembered. Not created, it is uncovered. This is the paradox's resolution. Shifting frequency feels like death, but it is resurrection. Feels like erasure, but it is unveiling. Feels like annihilation, but it is revelation. And yet, another paradox waits. Because if shifting frequency reveals the true self, then the question becomes, what happens to the old self? Does it vanish? Does it dissolve into nothing? Or does it linger like a ghost, haunting you, whispering reminders of the prison you once lived in? The truth is unsettling. The old self does not disappear easily. It echoes, claws. It tries to reassert itself. Like a shadow, it lingers at the edges of your awareness, pulling you back toward yesterday's vibration. The prison may crumble, but its memory remains. This is why vigilance is required. Because the moment you let down your guard, the old frequency tries to reclaim you. The false self whispers, "Come back. You know me. I am safe. I am familiar." And if you listen, you step backward through the doorway, back into the prison you thought you had left. So the paradox is this: becoming your true self is not a single act. It is a continual dying, a continual rebirth, a continual refusal to be seduced by the ghost of who you were. This is not erasure. It is discipline. The discipline of remembering who you are, again and again, until the ghost fades, until the true frequency stabilizes, until the new reality anchors. But let us not forget the larger riddle. If shifting frequency is resurrection, not annihilation, then why does it feel so terrifying? Why does it feel so final? Why does it feel like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into oblivion? Because the mind cannot grasp what it has not yet experienced. To the mind, the unknown is death. To the heart, the unknown is possibility. The doorway stands between them, demanding a choice. Cling to the false self and call it survival, or step into the unknown and call it life. This is the paradox we now face. When you shift frequency, you are not erased, you are revealed. And yet, the only way to know this is to risk feeling erased. The only way to discover the true self is to allow the death of the false. And so we end here, standing on the edge of another haunting question. If the old self must die for the new self to be revealed, then perhaps the reality you long for is already alive, waiting silently for the death of who you've been. Which brings us to the next cliff, the next paradox, the next question that refuses to be ignored. What if your desired reality is already alive, just waiting for the old you to die? That is where we go next. The paradox strikes like lightning. The reality you ache for, the dream you chase, the future you crave, it may not be something you need to build at all. It may already exist, not as fantasy, not as possibility, but as a living frequency, alive and waiting. And yet it will never open its arms to you, not while the old self still clings to the throne. This thought disturbs, because everything you've been taught insists that you must strive, work, and construct your future piece by piece, that you must climb toward it, earn it, deserve it. But what if the reality you want already stands fully formed, waiting just beyond the veil of your current identity? If that is true, then the barrier is not reality's absence. The barrier is your presence as the wrong self. The old you, the one vibrating with yesterday's frequencies, bound by borrowed beliefs, seduced by the prison of familiarity that self cannot enter. And so, the reality you long for waits, watching silently, refusing to open until the imposter dies. Pause and let this sink in. Your dream reality may not need to be created. It may need to be recognized. And recognition requires death, the death of the self that cannot align with it. This is where the paradox twists the knife. You have been conditioned to believe that you are moving toward your dream, that each step takes you closer. But in truth, the dream is already alive, and it is not you moving toward it. It is waiting for you to become the frequency that matches. Which means your journey is not external at all. It is internal. The question is not, how do I reach my desired reality? The question is, who must I die as, and who must I become, so that my desired reality recognizes me as its own? Now the terror sharpens, because it means that all your striving, all your searching, all your desperate effort has been aimed in the wrong direction. You have been trying to chase what already exists, when the real task is to dissolve the self that reality keeps rejecting. This is why your dream feels so close, yet unreachable. It is not far, it is here. It is not absent, it is alive. The only reason you cannot step into it is because the frequency you currently broadcast is incompatible. And until that broadcast changes, the door will remain closed. But here is the paradox's cruel beauty. The moment you allow the death of the old self, the reality that has been waiting floods in with breathtaking speed. What seemed impossible becomes inevitable. What felt distant becomes immediate, because reality does not need time to create itself. It is already alive, vibrating, waiting for the identity that matches. And so the haunting question becomes, how much longer will you cling to the old self, knowing that every day you delay its death is another day you remain exiled from the reality that has been waiting for you? This is not a gentle question. It is merciless, but it must be asked, because the truth is merciless. Think of the patterns you've been repeating, the failures that circle back, the disappointments that sting again and again. Each one is not proof that your dream does not exist. Each one is proof that your current frequency cannot access it. Each repetition is reality whispering, "The one you are now is not invited. Become who you are meant to be, and the door will open." This is the paradox. The dream is not withholding itself, it is protecting itself. Protecting itself from the misaligned self you currently carry. Because your desired reality cannot survive if entered by the wrong frequency. It would collapse, distort, vanish. And so it waits, alive but inaccessible, until the right version of you emerges. This means that the struggle is not to find your dream. The struggle is to bury the old self. The struggle is to allow the death that feels unbearable so that the rebirth can occur. But let us sit with the discomfort, because here lies the deeper terror. If your dream reality is already alive, then why has it not chosen you yet? If it already exists, if it already vibrates, then why are you still standing outside its gates? The answer is unsettling, because reality does not bend for your desire. Reality chooses based on resonance. And until your frequency audition matches the role, you will not be cast. This is why longing alone is not enough. Why effort alone is not enough. Why visualization alone is not enough. Because the audition tape you send to reality is not your words, your effort, or your imagination. It is your frequency. And if your frequency carries the vibration of the old self, then no matter how passionately you beg, reality cannot choose you. Now pause again, because the implication is terrifying. Your dream reality has been rejecting you. Not because it is cruel, not because it is distant, but because the version of you standing at the doorway is not the one it recognizes. And so we arrive at another paradox. Your dream is already alive, but it cannot coexist with the current you. The old self must die so the new self can step through. Only then will the reality waiting for you extend its hand. But here is the sharper edge of the paradox. If your dream reality is alive, then it has agency. It is not passive. It is not simply waiting. It is watching. It is evaluating. It is rejecting and accepting based on frequency. Which means the haunting question is no longer whether you can choose your dream reality, but whether it will choose you. This flips the entire script. You are not the pursuer. You are the pursued. You are not the creator. You are the candidate. Reality is not something you chase. It is something that auditions you. And until you match the role, it will not open. This is why identity death is non-negotiable. Because your current self has already been auditioned, and it has been rejected. Only the death of the old self and the birth of the new frequency can turn rejection into acceptance. So let us sharpen this paradox into the next cliff. If your desired reality is already alive, then the next question is not how to create it, but why it has not yet picked you. And that question cuts deeper than all the rest. So we end here, suspended once more in tension, holding the riddle unresolved. If your dream reality already exists, why hasn't it picked you yet? That is where we go next. The question now burns with merciless clarity. If your dream reality already exists, alive and waiting, why hasn't it picked you? This is not a question of effort, not a question of worth, not a question of how badly you want it. It is a question of resonance. Because reality does not respond to desire, it responds to frequency. It does not evaluate how hard you try. It evaluates who you are being. And so the paradox reveals itself in full. You are not the chooser. Reality is, you are not the architect. Reality is, you do not command the universe with your longing. The universe chooses you based on your alignment. This truth is unsettling. It feels like rejection. It feels like standing outside the gates of paradise, knocking until your hands bleed, while silence echoes back. But the silence is not cruelty. The silence is precision. It is reality refusing to admit a frequency that does not belong. Consider this carefully. Your dream reality is not waiting to be convinced. It is waiting to be matched. It will not bend to fit your current vibration. It will not compromise its structure to accommodate your misalignment. It has integrity, and until your frequency aligns with its design, it will withhold itself. This is not punishment. It is protection. Imagine if your desired reality allowed you in while you were still carrying the old frequency of lack, fear, or unworthiness. It would collapse instantly. You would sabotage it. You would distort it. You would destroy it. The rejection, painful as it feels, is mercy in disguise. But mercy does not soften the paradox. Because the truth remains, your dream has not picked you yet. And the reason is hauntingly simple: you have not yet become the version of yourself that resonates with it. This is where the contradiction deepens. You believe you are ready. You feel the urgency. You ache for the change. Yet reality disagrees. It sees the frequency you carry, and it responds with ruthless consistency. Not yet. Not this version. Not until the old self dissolves. And so the question becomes, what does it take to be chosen? The answer is both brutal and liberating. To be chosen, you must become unrecognizable to the self you are today. You must shed the borrowed identity, the unconscious betrayals, the prison of familiarity. You must allow the death of the old self not as metaphor, but as frequency. Only then can the dream reality recognize you as one of its own. This is why reality feels like an audition. Each moment of your life is a performance, not for others, but for the universe itself. And your frequency is the script. Reality listens. Reality evaluates. Reality chooses. But here is the paradox sharpened to its blade. You cannot fake the audition. You cannot trick reality with words, rituals, or empty affirmations, because reality is deaf to pretense. It hears only vibration. It accepts only resonance. And this is why so many remain exiled from their dream. They perform desire, but they broadcast fear. They perform confidence, but they broadcast unworthiness. They perform gratitude, but they broadcast scarcity. And reality, with merciless precision, chooses accordingly. Now pause. Let this disturb you, because it means that your life as it is right now, the relationships you hold, the opportunities you attract, the struggles you face are not accidents. They are the audition tape reality has already judged. They are the roles you have been cast in based on the frequency you broadcast. And until that broadcast changes, the roles will not change. So the rejection is not random. It is consistent. It is exact. It is the mirror of who you are being. This should rattle you. It should destabilize the illusion that reality is unfair, or cruel, or indifferent. Reality is none of those things. Reality is precise. It chooses based on resonance, and resonance never lies. But let us cut deeper. If reality has not picked you yet, then you must ask yourself, which version of me has been auditioning? Is it the authentic self, stripped of programming, broadcasting truth? Or is it the false self, carrying borrowed voices, humming with betrayal, vibrating with fear? If you are honest, the answer will disturb you, because most of the time it is the false self who auditions, and reality rejects it every time. This is the paradox that few are willing to face. You are not being rejected, you are being asked to transform. The no you keep hearing from reality is not condemnation. It is instruction. It is telling you exactly what must die so that the yes can arrive. But here lies the greater terror. Transformation requires becoming unrecognizable, not only to the world, but to yourself. It requires letting go of everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything that anchors you to the old frequency. And this death is what most refuse. They cling to the old self and then curse reality for rejecting them. Yet reality cannot be fooled. It will not choose the self that does not belong. It will wait, patient, exact, ruthless, until the day you finally surrender the false self and allow the true frequency to emerge. And then, and only then, the dream reality that has always been alive will choose you. This is the haunting paradox of being chosen. You do not convince reality, you become undeniable to it. You do not demand the dream, you transform into the self it has been waiting for. You do not chase, it recognizes you as its own and opens the gates. But here is the final twist. If reality is auditioning you, then the last question is the most terrifying of all. Are you willing to become unrecognizable to everything you've ever known in order to be chosen? Because this is the cost. To be picked, you must die to who you were. To be chosen, you must abandon the familiar world that knows your name. To be accepted, you must betray the old self so completely that even you no longer recognize it. And this is where we end, standing on the edge of the final paradox. Are you willing to become unrecognizable to everything you've ever known in order to be chosen? That is the question that leads us into the finale. The final question arrives with no soft edges. Are you ready to kill the self that reality keeps rejecting? This is not a metaphor. It is not a poetic flourish. It is the sharpest paradox of all. Because until that self dies, the self built of borrowed voices, false frequencies, and prisons of familiarity, you will remain outside the reality that has been alive, waiting, pulsing with possibility. And so the choice before you is merciless. Cling to the old self and remain in repetition, or end it and step into the frequency that reality has been waiting to embrace. But how do you kill a self? How do you murder what feels like you? This is where the paradox grows violent. Because the old self is not an enemy, it is a survival mechanism. It was built to protect you. It was forged from wounds, stitched together from fear, programmed to keep you alive in environments that once felt dangerous. To kill it feels like betraying the only identity that has carried you this far. And yet, that survival self is the same one reality keeps rejecting. Because survival is not life. Survival hums at a frequency of scarcity, fear, and contraction. Survival vibrates with not enough. Survival broadcasts just getting by. And reality mirrors it with brutal exactness. This is why the same patterns repeat. This is why the same struggles return. Because the self you refuse to release is the self the universe refuses to reward. So the death is non-negotiable. The only question left is whether you will choose it willingly, or whether life will choose it for you through collapse, breakdown, or destruction. Pause here. Feel the weight of it. Because what we are speaking of is not self-improvement. It is not polishing the surface. It is not minor adjustment. It is self-annihilation, the erasure of the identity that has kept you in exile from your dream reality. And yet here is the paradox. In killing the old self, nothing real is lost. Because that self was never you. It was a mask, a script, an echo. What dies is illusion. What remains is essence. What burns is falsehood. What emerges is truth. But to reach that truth, you must endure the fire. The fire of letting go of beliefs that once felt unshakable. The fire of walking away from relationships, jobs, and patterns that reinforce the old vibration. The fire of facing the terrifying emptiness between the death of the old self and the emergence of the new. This in-between is the crucible, the void, the silence after the funeral and before the resurrection. Feels unbearable, feels like nothingness. And it is here that most turn back, resurrecting the corpse of the old self because at least it feels familiar. But those who remain in the fire, those who endure the void, discover the paradox's hidden gift. The old self's death is the new self's birth. The void is not emptiness, it is creation. The silence is not absence, it is preparation. And then, almost without warning, the shift comes. The frequency changes. The resonance aligns. And the reality that has been waiting recognizes you, chooses you, welcomes you in. This is not magic. It is not miracle. It is law. The universe responds to frequency, and the moment your frequency matches, reality must reflect it. But here is the last paradox, the one that lingers even after the doorway opens. Once you have killed the self that reality kept rejecting, you will face this death again and again. Because frequency is not static. Identity is not fixed. Transformation is not one moment. It is a continual cycle of death and rebirth. Each time you outgrow a reality, the self that belonged to it must die. Each time you step toward a greater dream, the old frequency must dissolve. Each time you move forward, you must kill another layer of the self-reality no longer accepts. This is the rhythm of becoming: birth, death, rebirth. Again and again, until what remains is no longer an identity at all, but pure frequency, pure resonance, pure truth. So the final question is not only whether you are ready to kill the self that reality keeps rejecting now, It is whether you are ready to live a life of continual deaths and rebirths. Whether you are willing to let go of comfort forever and instead live in the fire of transformation endlessly. Because only in that fire is freedom. Only in that fire is authenticity. Only in that fire does reality choose you again and again, with greater and greater precision. And so the finale arrives. The choice is yours. You can cling to the old self, replaying yesterday's reality until your final breath, caged by familiarity, betrayed by frequency, rejected by the dream that has always been alive. Or you can kill it. You can set fire to the false identity, walk into the void, endure the silence, and emerge as the frequency that reality has been waiting to welcome. The paradox cannot be resolved for you, can only be lived. And so I leave you with the haunting question that has been waiting since the beginning, the question that tears apart comfort and demands everything. Are you ready to kill the self that reality keeps rejecting? The answer will decide whether you remain prisoner or finally step into the reality that has always been alive, waiting for you.